Good evening, everyone. My name is Abby Beho, and I am the Program Director at Lake Health and Wellbeing, which is a non-governmental organization based here in St. Kitts. And it's a pleasure for me to welcome you all to this panel discussion on the theme of building a healthy drinking culture in St. Kitts and Nevis. So this panel discussion is part of the Ministry of Health's annual 7-week SKN Moves campaign. And this particular week has been designated as Healthy Drinking Week. And during this week, we encourage the public to consider not just what we're eating, but also what we're drinking, and to make healthy and safe beverage choices. So just to give you a bit of background in case you're not too familiar with SKN Moves, it's part of a regional initiative called Caribbean Moves. And this initiative aims to improve the health of our nation by focusing on 3 pillars, which is physical activity, healthy eating, and age-appropriate health checks. So tonight in this panel discussion, we will be exploring our drinking culture here in St. Kitts and Nevis, the impact of our beverage choices, and how we can all work together to build a healthy drinking culture and thus improve our overall health. So tonight we have an excellent group of panelists who are going to take us through this topic, and they represent a diversity of organizations. So I'm now going to invite our panelists to introduce themselves, and we'll just go down the line. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to tell us a bit about the organization that you're representing, your role within that organization, and of course your name. So over to Mr. Natal.
My name is Nevis, and I'm here on behalf of National Drug Council. We do work in intervention and prevention with respect to drugs, and we facilitate persons who have issues, but that is not so much our main job. We listen to you, and then we refer you to the appropriate entity to assist you in solving the issue. Tonight, I'm just here as a drug prevention officer. Of course, most of you listening and saw the ad. I know you know that I'm a chemist, I'm a forensic psychologist. I'm not here in that capacity tonight. I'm just simply here to represent the National Drug Council.
Thank you. And on to Ms. Duncan. Mrs. Duncan.
Thank you, Abby. Pleasant good night to everyone. My name is Lataya Matthew Duncan. I am the Nutrition Surveillance Coordinator within the Health Promotion Unit in the Ministry of Health, St. Kitts. And our main role is to implement nutrition initiatives as well as activities in St. Kitts and Nevis, whether locally or regionally, activities that the countries have a common goal to implement.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Duncan. And over to Michelle Baker.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Baker. I am the Advocacy and Research Officer of Lake Health and Wellbeing. And at Lake Health and Wellbeing, we do a number of things, particularly focused on public health. So we do work with women's health, we do work with children, menstrual health, but in particular, one of our biggest projects is our Your Sweeten Up campaign. And so that is one of the main projects that I work on. And that project is particularly important tonight. It's relevant to the conversation. Our Your Sweeten Up campaign is aimed at educating the public on the effects and risks associated with sugar-sweetened beverages or sugary drinks, and also to advocate for policies that would help to curb this problem, such as sugar-sweetened beverage taxes, front-of-package warning labels, and school nutrition policies. And all of these are very important in fighting the obesity and non-communicable disease epidemic. So I'm happy to be here tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michelle. And then over to Dr. Alpier at the end.
All right. I don't have a very long introduction. I'm here representing the St. Kitts Nevis Medical and Dental Association as the Vice President. I think our role is known to most. We have a show which airs, I think, every Monday night, still, for which I was a host for some time, which is the HealthWise TV show. You know, the Medical and Dental Association has a dual role in the sense that we provide support to doctors, but from the standpoint of advocacy for patients that we treat as well, that's a very important role. And I think this topic is very particular to in terms of interest to our association for a myriad reasons. I think we are the ones who see the downstream effects of healthy intake of any kind, or sometimes insufficient intake of the good ones, like water here before us. So I think it's a very timely conversation as we head into some of our festive season. We have Independence coming up, and right on that we have we're just coming off Culturama. So certainly I think it's a timely conversation, and I hope that whatever we discuss here will at least be that sort of seed that germinates, and we can continue the conversations around the dinner table and wherever we gather around the Federation. So thank you so much for having me here.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for your introductions, and thank you for all for participating in this panel discussion tonight. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, and once we get back from the commercial break, then we'll get right into the discussion. So stay with us. Back.
It's okay to party. It's okay to drink. But it's never okay to drive after drinking at a party. Make it a night to remember, not a night to forget. Stay alive. Don't drink and drive. Make the right choice. St. Kitts and Nevis.
Yeah, man. Another day in the books. Well, hello there. Ooh, she pretty from head to toe, and are you ready to go? Wait there. Whew. Can't afford to slip up. Not even in my dreams.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to this panel discussion on building a healthy drinking culture in St. Kitts and Nevis. And so we're going to just get straight into the discussion. So I think it's important to start really at the beginning. So we're talking about drinking culture. And so I guess what I want to get from our panelists is what they believe the drinking culture in St. Kitts and Nevis is. So the question for you all is, how would you describe the drinking culture in St. Kitts and Nevis? And what are you most concerned about when it comes to our drinking culture? And so I'll start with Mr. Natal, who's right next to me. And we'll move down the line.
Yes, our drinking culture is one of a celebration type. In terms of achieving a particular milestone, we like to celebrate that by way of drinking. It is also a lazy way of persons who are facing life challenges to just bury their heads in the sand and move on with some degree of comfort. And what happened also is that we have a great number of youngsters now on one end of the spectrum, and you have the older folks on the other end of the spectrum. And they glorify, there's a subtle glorification in the amount of alcohol you would have consumed. And this is manifested by having the empty bottles well displayed. And you seem to get some degree of ranking when you would have consumed a great amount of alcohol. The world population review indicated that we had at least 66% of persons in St. Kitts Nevis who would have consumed alcohol in their lifetime. And we are just above the global average with respect to persons, global average annually with respect to persons who would have consumed raw alcohol. And it is interesting to note that we have quite a large number of persons involved in the consumption of alcohol, and we're just above that global average. Guess what? We are consuming, the males are consuming 10 liters of alcohol annually, while the females are consuming 2.75 liters of alcohol. So we have both sexes really enjoying themselves with respect to alcohol consumption. It is not a male thing. It is not a female thing, it's a combination thereof, but we have much more younger persons getting involved in alcohol consumption.
Okay, thank you so much for your perspective. So, Mrs. Duncan, over to you in terms of how you feel the drinking culture in St. Kitts and Nevis is.
Thank you so much, Abby. When I saw this topic, I was like, drinking culture? I mean, what do Abby really mean? But when you really think about it, Natalia, he spoke about alcohol and how persons are now drinking more alcohol socially because it's a celebration. Similarly to how people consume sugar-sweetened beverages. In St. Kitts and Nevis, we now have a trend. For me, the cultural shift or the change would be where you find more persons consuming more labeled beverages, as in more brand beverages compared to locally prepared beverages. Now, I could recall more back in the day, well, in my younger time, and I still consider myself extremely young. Most of the beverages you would actually consume, even at home, would be like locally made beverages. These shops, the sideway shop, you would have options of like maybe 2 or 3, and the others would be alcoholic drinks. But now you have a lot more brands on the shelves, and persons are more attracted to these brands. Some of them, it do not even really matter the cost. You know, it's just a brand thing. And research is showing that. We did a food consumption survey in St. Kitts and Nevis, and it showed that more than 50% of the population consume at least one sugar-sweetened beverage daily. And sugar-sweetened beverage means something that is a beverage, liquid that have added sugar to it. And, you know, even though some person say, well, that ain't everybody and that is only one. Okay, but if you were to actually look at it, most persons actually consuming more than one. And so they are more shifting away from the healthier options with less sugar and replacing water with more of the sugar-sweetened beverages.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Duncan. And then over to you, Michelle. So how do you see the drinking culture in St. Kitts and Nevis, and what are you most concerned about?
So in St. Kitts and Nevis, I find I would echo a lot of what the panelists so far have already mentioned, which is that, you know, we have celebrations, we have carnival, we have Culturama, and then, you know, we have the weekend events that come around, and it's just expected sometimes that we would be drinking. So part of it is, you know, celebratory events, but then I think there's also a part of it in terms of what Mr. Nital said, mental health disorders and alcohol use disorder, substance use disorder. I was having a conversation with someone recently about sugar-sweetened beverages, about alcohol, because it always comes up in some conversation. And they were agreeing with me and they understood everything I was saying, but they said to me very honestly, he said, you know, I heard everything you said just now, but to be honest with you, as soon as I leave here is the bar I go in. I go in by the bar to get a drink because Michelle, honestly, as a man here in St. Kitts and Nevis, I feel like I can't even really express my emotions. I feel like I cannot actually be honest about some of the things I'm going through. And so at the end of a hard day, that is what he ends up doing, going to the bar to have a drink. And so it really is used also for coping. And it speaks to a larger problem around not only alcohol use disorder, but also mental health conditions as well.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you very much. So, Dr. Pierre, so to end with you, what are you thinking in terms of the drinking culture? What are you most concerned about?
Well, I
Because
think
you,
a lot.
Doctor, I mean, you must see.
Yeah, well, certainly. But I think beyond the concern is, I think we have to speak to the reality. Is that how alcohol is so interweaved into our socialization, especially as men. In fact, actually, I like to use a term that says alcohol is the lubricant that facilitates social intercourse. You know, it's essentially, if men gather together, they cannot begin to engage with each other in any meaningful way unless a couple drinks are passing around. And the flip side to this is that if you don't drink, then it becomes almost difficult to find a circle where you can find yourself comfortably. I mean, I think many men can speak to the fact that whether it's because of Lent or because the doctor took your license, as men say, you know, you go out and then suddenly you say, I'll have water, and everybody looks at you very strange. In fact, there are men There are men who say, I won't buy you a drink. If it's water you're having, you should buy your own drink. So there's that peer pressure component of it. But I think a lot of the focus has been on alcohol. And since we spoke to drinking, I want to speak to the things that aren't alcohol that we aren't drinking nearly enough of, which is water. I think we're going through some of the hottest periods right now in the summer. And when I see patients, a lot of times patients show up and for different reasons, doctors will do urinalysis on them. And I think there's one thing that doctors don't even pay attention to, and I'm not sure why, because there's so many things. If there's no ketones and there's no sugar and there's no glucose, but there's something that at the top of the urinalysis strip that says specific gravity, right? And that speaks to the level of dehydration. Somebody who has a specific gravity of above 1.030, which is so common in this country, is actually dehydrated, right? And there's a risk for clots, there is a risk for renal injury, there's a risk for, I mean, the myriad, the full spectrum of medical conditions that's come as a result. So yes, there's the alcohol intake, there's a sweet sugar intake, but the question is also replacing not just the conversation and the meaningful engagement and interaction, it's also replacing the healthier options, which is water. And I think there just simply isn't enough water consumption. I want to be the first person on this panel to debunk the myth of 8 glasses of water a day. This is ridiculous because it really depends on where you work. A man in the sun cannot say that 8 glasses of water works for him, and the guy in the office in air conditioning all day says the same thing. So I think those are the type of conversations we need to have in terms of, so we don't say no to alcohol, but also say yes to water. All right.
Yeah, I have to give that a round of applause, definitely. So I think what I heard from all of you really is, one, alcohol is being used as a coping mechanism. So that's one. Also alcohol and also sugary sweetened beverage is used as a tool for socialization. So what I'm wondering is, what can we do to shift that mindset to get people to look at more healthy options when it comes to coping skills, but also what can we do in terms of making non-alcoholic, healthier drinks fun, and so that we can socialize in a healthy way. So I don't know if anybody would like to take that as to what can we do to shift our mindsets. Mr. Natal?
I would like to chip in here before we go to the mindset. We would realize that every time you see somebody with a spliff, marijuana, in the next hand is alcohol. So now we have a situation where it is not a drinking of the alcohol. If you draw a Venn diagram, you'd have persons who would drink but not smoke. But most of the time you have persons who smoke would always have a bottle of alcohol in the next hand. So that is a problem for us as well. I think we need education. We need to be frank and candid and let people know the adverse impact that the consumption of alcohol could bring about. It could be a public health issue, a major public health issue, because there are so many different ramifications when you consume alcohol. They become less productive, and the list goes on and on without even mentioning. And I think education and awareness, and if necessary, we can have intervention at a very early stage, to prevent things like alcohol dependency, alcohol use disorder, and whichever way we have to use, whether psychotherapy or pharmacological treatment, so that you can give them medication to help assist that. But the mindset, and we have persons who are under a lot of pressure. The Surgeon General indicated, I heard it last night, that parents are overwhelmed and burnt out. They're stressed out. And some parents, instead of coping with that, they bury their heads in a few bottles of alcohol.
Would anybody else like to weigh in on the mindset before we go to break?
Well, yes, particularly when we look at the mindset, well, we just spoke quite a bit about alcohol. You know, we are looking at beverages in general, right? So for me, similarly to how persons have this mindset as it relates to alcohol, and, you know, there are implications for abusing alcohol. You know, it is the same thing with sugar-sweetened beverages. There are health implications when you abuse them. So sometimes persons don't like to use the correct language and say abuse, but persons abuse alcohol, persons abuse food. And so sometimes, just how Mr. Nital just said, we have to create a lot more awareness. I mean, so many times in St. Kitts and Nevis, the health literacy of the population, persons know. They might not specifically be able to explain, like how Dr. Pierre would, and say, well, if you were to drink alcohol, this is exactly what would be the effects on the liver, etc. But they know consuming too much alcohol, there are health implications. It's not good for their health. So I think other than creating, additionally with creating awareness and education, we really need some more aggressive interventions. And like my colleague rightly said just now, you know, we need to start early. Early is key, and we can't always be looking at treatment. We need to do a lot more preventative, not just with medical conditions, but also with some of these addictions.
So we're just going to go for a quick break, and then we'll come back and pick up on those points later.
The dangers of sweet beverages in the Caribbean. It is time to shine a light on the dangers of sugary beverages. Sugar-sweetened beverages are the main source of sugar in our diets, and eating and drinking too much sugar has been linked to being overweight and obese. In St. Kitts and Nevis, 50% of adult females and 37% of males are overweight and obese. And 28% of children are either overweight or obese. A survey showed that 62% of students between the ages of 13 and 15 drank one or more carbonated sugar-sweetened beverage every day, exceeding their daily healthy limit. So, how much sugar should we consume? The World Health Organization and American Heart Association recommends that children aged 2 to 18 should consume less than 25 grams of sugar daily, and adults should consume less than 50 grams of sugar daily. It will surprise you how much sugar is in some of your favorite beverages. This chart shows that on average, one serving of a sugary beverage exceeds the daily maximum sugar intake for children, which is 25 grams, and is very close or sometimes over the limit for adults at 50 grams. The impact of sweet beverages on your health, your family, and community can be severe. So, it's time to rethink your drink. This message has been brought to you by the St. Kitts and Nevis Ministry of Health.
Wonderful. Welcome back, everyone, to this panel discussion on building a healthy drinking culture in St. Kitts and Nevis. We've been having a very interesting and informative discussion, so already just like to thank our panelists so far for the discussion. So we're going to take a little bit of a turn. So Michelle Baker is, not only is she representing Lake Health and Wellbeing, but she's the youngest person on the panel. So we'd like to get a bit of a youth perspective. So Michelle, from your observation, how do young people in St. Kitts and Nevis view alcohol, sugary drinks, and what do you think influences their consumption habits? I think you've kind of touched on, I think you touched on it kind of briefly before, but.
Right, I touched on some of it already, which would be the increase in mental health conditions as well. But additionally, I think it was Dr. Pierre that also mentioned that peer pressure factor, because I can totally relate to what he was saying. As soon as I say that I do not drink, there is a bit of pressure there, there's a reaction there, and so sometimes it's not seen as cool if you're not going to go ahead and drink with everyone else, so there's some peer pressure there as well. And I think there is also a lack of alternatives, and I don't just mean alternative beverages, but in terms of our social events. I spoke to a teenager recently, and I asked her, you know, what are you all doing, you know, around your age? What do y'all do for fun? And she literally said to me, smoke and drink. That's what they do. That's what she said to me. And this is somebody who is working, she's in school, but at the same time, she said this is what is going on around her. Many of the different events that we have in St. Kitts and Nevis, you know, they often revolve around drinking. And so also having alternative social outlets for young people is very important. I think it's just a culture around us, and it seems like the cool thing to do, and everybody else is doing it, but we have to have alternatives in place.
Well, thank you so much for that. So we'll move on a little bit and try and get a bit of more of a medical perspective. So Dr. Pierre, you're next up. So I just wondered if you could just discuss some of the most common health issues that you observe in St. Kitts and Nevis that are directly linked to overconsumption of alcohol and also sugar-sweetened beverages.
Absolutely. I think one of the things people don't realize that alcohol is actually very, very sugar dense, in the sense that it's made from sugar, right? So it may not taste that way, but it certainly is. So it is in effect a sugary sweet beverage for those who enjoy it, and they're the sweeter ones of it as well. So there's that as a fact, and I think I'm not sure who mentioned some of the statistics here, but I'll give you a statistic that I think just makes that connects with everyone, is that we in the Caribbean have one of the highest rates of alcohol per capita in the world, right? People consume alcohol. So that's the first thing. We don't have good measures for what is a healthy alcohol intake. Most people don't know what that is. And let's start there. Most people think that, until I get drunk and I'm falling down, I'm okay. Right, is the reason why we can drink as much as we do and we can drive. But if we go to the U.S. or anywhere and so on, and where there are breathalyzer tests and there are things that enforce that type of, or a bar says I won't serve you alcohol after 2, or I won't serve you alcohol if you look like you've already had and you've already had too much. Unless we have those things enforced, I don't know that we'll understand what the true implications of this, and I don't know that we'll make much headway with conversations like this. I think there needs to be some redundancy, because we're paying for it every day in terms of healthcare. We're seeing younger and younger people with onset of diabetes and hypertension from a very, very early age. And those are the downstream effects. The other thing as well, too, is not uncommon to find individuals. I sat at a bar the other day and saw one gentleman consuming several bottles of specific alcohol because he believes that it actually helps with sexual prowess. Right, and those are some of the misconceptions. So there are people who drink alcohol, consume alcohol, and there's nothing that actually impairs sexual performance more than alcohol itself. Right, people who think that I can speak and I can communicate when I drink alcohol, but alcohol is a depressant. It doesn't, So there are many things that we think that we're actually helping, actually hurting ourselves. So from the spectrum of mental health conditions, but more so those things that we will have. For example, 70% of us will have hypertension, because essential hypertension, which is idiopathic in the sense that whether we do whatever we do, ethnicity and a number of things come into play that will make us hypertensive, but we're actually accelerating the pace at which we get those diseases and the implications. I saw a young man earlier today, very young man, just 1 year older than my daughter, with heart failure. So those are the things that were once reserved for individuals who are much older than we are, and I take a little offense when Abby calls Michelle young, because Latoya and I are very, very young. Right, but Michelle. But the reality is that a lot of people are actually challenged to call themselves young when they're actually paying for diseases that old people would traditionally have. And I think alcohol can be linked to this, because the person who drinks is also a person who's obese. Right? The people who drink are the couch potatoes. You don't see a guy who drinks heavily and is on the golf course walking in the morning. Right? So there are all these other things that are interlinked, and all the other social determinants of health that come into play, and those are the things that we have to look at, and we have to really strike those things at the heart. We as doctors, we inherit the problems. Very seldom do we get to actually intervene. We see these people when they come in, and it's already too late to do a lot for them. So much of what we're struggling with, so much of what we're paying, and we're trying to determine what is the right expenditure on healthcare. So much of that is linked to things that we can prevent, like the amount of alcohol we consume, the amount of sugary sweet beverages, and the amount of water we don't drink.
Mrs. Duncan, would you like to weigh in on the health impact of sugar-sweetened beverages? And
of course, I think Dr. Pierce said quite a bit, and he said a very important point that probably I should have said that, but I'm happy it was said. Speaking about alcohol, and alcohol actually in the nutrition field, we actually call alcohol liquid fat, because it actually pack more calories than carbohydrates that persons tend to avoid. And so, when you think about alcohol and the sugar-sweetened beverages and so forth. So many times, you know, we've been focused a lot on the sugar-sweetened beverages within the Ministry of Health, I must say, and I don't think we have been paying enough attention to also alcohol and the impact and the fact that we have persons who are consuming alcohol at a much younger age and at alarming rates. And then when it comes to lifestyle and what persons can do as relates to alcohol, like Dr. Pierre correctly said, it impairs persons, and a lot of persons think that it helps with performance. You know, it helps them it builds confidence, it helps them to look cooler, you know, and so sometimes with these messages, we also have to find messages to show that this is not what it actually is. Like, I saw a commercial with a particular drink. I think it was a local commercial, and the lady was looking at somebody at the bar, and, you know, the person, physically, the person wasn't very attractive, but when the person consumed the drink, the person looked attractive to her. And, you know, and I'm saying, would I want to drink that if that would impair my vision to that point where somebody who look totally different to the way they look physically, you know, and literally that is what alcohol does. Literally, it makes persons feel things that are not there, you know, and so the mental impact of it, the social impact of it, you know, for peer pressure, for example, you know, as well as the health impact of alcohol and sugar-sweetened beverages. And like Dr. Pierce says, a lot of time, you know, they tend to feel they are the one who a lot of persons would feel these burdens and they inherit them. I'll be your NGO, you'll probably do a lot speaking to persons about it and looking at it. But I think we need to really start focusing on alcohol also and pay a lot more attention to it. And that is me saying it from the Ministry of Health point of view, that, you know, we really, really need to pay a lot more attention to it.
Okay, wonderful. I think we're going to go for a break. Not yet. Okay, so not yet. So what we'll do is we'll ask Mr. Natal about this, the impact, the social impact now of alcohol abuse. So I know that right now we're looking at violence as a public health issue, and I was actually wondering around how much of a contribution does alcohol play to this uptick in the violence that we have today, and what is sort of the wider social impact of alcohol abuse?
But of course, your faculties would be impaired once you're under the control of alcohol. As a matter of fact, the statistics would have indicated that the alcohol use disorder, there's a scale of symptom severity. 2 to 3 is minimal, 4 to 5 is moderate, and 6 and above is severe. And the statistics shows that 10% of our population is upward of 6, meaning that there actually exists a high probability that people could harm themselves, harm others as a result of the way we consume alcohol. We have no reason being over 6 on that scale of severity. And it's unfortunate because 10% of our population, 10% of 50,000 is 5,000. And it's something that we need to really look into. When we drink, we're not aware of what we're doing. We could socialize in a sort of awkward way. We could get involved sexually with people, unprotected. We can either, and I'm talking about females too, they can get pregnant. They can pick up STDs, whatever else. And the funny thing about it, when you're under the influence of alcohol, you get pregnant, something you do not know, for at least maybe even 2 months. Sometimes even 2 months you do not be aware, and you continue drinking the alcohol, not being aware that you're pregnant. And then you have some congenital issues. That is the situation between conception and birth in the intra-uterus region there. And it's very unfortunate. And the baby can suffer. It could suffer while it's there. It could develop abnormalities. And it can also grow with those abnormalities. So we have to be mindful and always be aware when we're consuming alcohol.
Okay, all right. So we're now going to take a break, and then when we come back, we'll pick up the discussion. So thank you, everyone, so far.
If you're HIV positive or have an STI, having unprotected sex with multiple partners puts them in grave danger. You will expose every partner and their present and future partners to HIV or another STI. Use a condom every time you have sex. You can live a productive life even if diagnosed with HIV. Remember, early detection is key to your survival. Be responsible, protect yourself and others. Help stop the spread of HIV and other STIs.
Healthwise on ZIZ TV, Mondays at 8:30 p.m. Hosted by Dr. Monique Lescott, Dr. Jolette Woodley, and Dr. Patrice Lawrence.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to our panel discussion on building a healthy drinking culture in St. Kitts and Nevis. And we've been having, as we have been having for the whole half an hour, a very interesting discussion. So we're gonna try and look at some solutions now to a certain extent. So I'm gonna switch to Ms. Duncan and kind of switch to almost a completely different topic. So it was, recently it was breastfeeding week. So we kind of want to integrate, have a holistic discussion. So, you know, as it relates to women that are breastfeeding, but also women who might be pregnant, can you just provide some tips and guidance on what they should and shouldn't be drinking?
Okay, well, definitely the first thing I would like to start with is there is no substitution for water. Okay, water is the first thing that persons need to be thinking about. Dr. Pierre mentioned the 8 glasses, but 8 glasses is the minimum amount. It do not mean to aim for 8 glasses. It means 8 glasses should be the less a person consumes in water per day. So when you look at pregnant women, breastfeeding women generally, sometimes you get persons, and I have to be quite honest, so many times, even recently I did a presentation and persons keep saying they don't like the taste of water. And I just said, but water don't, I mean, what is the taste that you don't like? You know? So, so the thing is, one of the things in the Ministry of Health in St. Kitts and Nevis that we have been looking at, because we do realize it's a challenge when it comes to persons consuming enough water, not only persons who are pregnant, but the population in general. So we do encourage persons to use this method where we use infused water, where you can add your fruits, fresh fruits, you can add herbs to water to give it a little flavor, to encourage persons to consume more water. We are not saying that you would have a small bottle, for example, in this size, or a small container this size, and it packed up there with fruits and just a little, you know, just a small amount of fruits, enough to give it a flavor, or herbs if you are somebody like that. You could even use vegetables like celery, cucumbers, for example, in order to flavor your water. I did a session just yesterday at an institution, and somebody was saying that when they are thirsty, their go-to is coconut water because it feels more refreshing than just drinking plain water. But we have to bear in mind that coconut water is not just water. Okay, coconut water, depending on the coconut that the individuals use, you might get a certain amount of sugar from it. It's also high in potassium. So you have to be extremely careful. And when you are thirsty, the first thing you have to drink about is water. Not 100% fruit juice, not energy drinks, not sport drinks, not all those other type of drinks you are seeing on the shelf that persons are gravitating towards when they want to consume something to quench their thirst. It should really be water, whether pregnant, breastfeeding, just everybody in general. And so we would like to normalize water, normalize drinking water again, if I can put it that way. We want persons to drink water and to not substitute water with other drinks.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. So we're stepping up. So we were just talking about breastfeeding. So now we're going to ask Michelle, what strategies do you think would be effective in encouraging young people to make healthier choices? So what is it that we can do to ensure that young people make healthier choices as it relates to their drinking habits?
So the first thing that I would say is to involve young people in creating these solutions and strategies. I'm always going to advocate for having young people be at the forefront of solving and addressing issues related to them. And so first thing would be bringing them to the table, not only after we have a strategy or after we have an intervention, but bring them to the table for the planning stage all the way through implementation. But some of the strategies that I personally am a fan of are policies. And so policies such as school nutrition policies, for example, because those relate obviously to children. And so protecting the school environment from marketing of alcohol, marketing of sugar-sweetened beverages, allowing healthy options in the school. So during the time that you're in school and you are learning about eating healthy and making healthy drinking choices, at the same time you would want to reinforce that by making sure that while the children are in school, that they're drinking water, that that's what they're allowed to bring to school, that we do not have unhealthy foods even surrounding the schools. So it's another thing that even when we teach them about healthy eating and drinking, and maybe that's what is being sold in the school, right outside the gate there are other unhealthy options. And so school nutrition policy is another one to consider to protect the school environment. And then also, like I mentioned, creating alternatives in terms of social activities, more youth groups, more youth activities and events that are not focused around alcohol or sugar-sweetened beverages, so that people start to develop other hobbies and other interests, because many young people have expressed that they often feel like the only or the majority of the social events and outlets revolve around drinking.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for that. As you're on the topic of policy, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the policies that we're advocating for, just generally as it relates to targeting sugar-sweetened beverages? Because there are a couple of other policies as well.
Sure. So I spoke briefly about school nutrition policy, but additionally, a big policy that we at Lake Health and Wellbeing advocate for is sugar-sweetened beverage tax, or SSB taxes. And so it would create a rise in the cost of sugar-sweetened beverages or sugary drinks such as soda, even some of these fruit juices, the back drinks, the Ovaltine, Milo, all the drinks that we might not think of that still contain an excess amount of sugar. And so by creating an increase in price, it is the hope that it would serve as somewhat of a deterrent, and so people will be less likely to buy it or buy less of it, thereby decreasing their consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages. Additionally, we also advocate for front of package warning labels. And so during the break, we just had a little bit of a discussion around cigarettes and how now in this day and age, if you want to buy cigarettes, on the packaging, you will see several warnings about the effects of the cigarettes, what is in the cigarettes. And so similarly, for food and beverages, we advocate for front of package warning labels that would say exactly how much sugar is in a drink, and in general, how much fat, how much sodium. And so people would have an indication of their intake and have a better idea of what they're drinking, because many people drink juice for breakfast, juice with lunch, juice with dinner. As many have said, people don't automatically grab water many times. And so front of package warning labels would help people to make more informed decisions as well.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. And then, so we'll turn to Ms. Duncan to really just, because we're looking at solutions now. So if you could just tell us a little bit about some of the initiatives that the Ministry of Health are working on to tackle the overconsumption of sugar-sweetened beverages. And if you want to touch on alcohol, you can as well, but okay. Yeah.
As relates to sugar-sweetened beverages, Michelle already alluded to the sugar-sweetened beverage tax, which have been in the pipeline for quite some time now, and we are really hoping that it would be finalized rather sooner than later, that look at increasing the cost of certain sugar beverages drinks, like she said, which included fruit drinks and other ones that are high in sugar, a certain value of sugar. Additionally, we have initiatives that we are looking at in the schools. For example, we are looking at reintroducing Water Wednesday within the school, where we encourage students and teachers to actually consume nothing but water on that particular day. So we are looking at calling it Water Wednesday. We also have another initiative that we are looking at coming up that not only look at sugar-sweetened beverages also, but healthy eating, which is known as the Sustainable School Project, and that is actually looking at creating gardens within primary schools that would then feed into school meals to ensure that we have an adequate supply of vegetables for students to consume, those who are benefiting from the school meal program. We have, Ministry of Health, we do have quite a bit of initiatives currently out there, but a lot of them are holistic. We are not just looking at one challenge. We are trying to see how many we can tackle with one particular initiative in order for us to achieve a particular goal. So a lot of them is based on education as well as creating awareness in all the programs, as well as building synergy as relates to NGOs. For example, we do quite a bit of activities with Lake Health and Wellness, who have really been one of the front runners as relates to activities with the Ministry of Health as an active NGO. And I really want to applaud them for that, because so many times persons focus too much on the Ministry of Health implementing these initiatives, trying to ensure that we have a healthy environment, when really and truly it is not supposed to be on the Ministry of Health only. So I just want to encourage everybody to come on board and actually help to make you, as well as St. Kitts and Nevis, overall healthy.
Okay, wonderful. So do we have time for one more question before we go to break? Or should we go to break? One, okay. Okay, great. So we're talking about, we are talking about solutions. So I'm going to go to Mr. Natal. So as it relates to alcohol and trying to address this issue, what is the National Council on Drug Abuse Prevention currently doing in terms of trying to tackle alcohol abuse?
We have just completed our national drug policy, and alcohol is part of the content. The Prime Minister and Cabinet will have embraced it thoroughly, very happy about it, excited. Almost every single occasion the Prime Minister gets to talk about that, he is elated, smile from ear to ear, and we had to put in some real intense work. And we want to say thanks to our associate, National Drug Council and the associate, who really helped over the many months in putting that document together. So we do that. We have programs at the schools, at the prison. We have adolescent program. We have something for the horizon. We actually develop curriculum. Once ago, we just used to go to the schools and make presentations. But what we do now is develop curriculum to guide the process. So you could always come back to it, or rewind it, do what you have to do to make sure you inculcate the information within the minds, the grammatical lines between the two ears of the students at a very tender age. I just want persons to be a bit mindful. The emphasis here at the nucleus is water, but there are persons who usually panic, and you have to be aware that you can over-consume water. You can actually get intoxicated by water consumption if you go way above the limit that you ought to go. Everybody's unique, and we know how much we need based on what we did and what we're about to do. So that panic button, as much as this information is vital for you, don't panic and overconsume water. Drink sufficient. You could drink a little bit over, but if you panic, you could do your research. Persons would have died from intoxication or water poisoning. So you must be mindful of your bodily quantity that you need.
Thank you so much. So we're going to go to a quick break, and then we will come back and pick up on some of those points. Thank you.
It's time that we realize that we must work together to thrive. The world as we know it, the sky and below it. Could I never have more wonder? Yeah, with life and all you see, and the climate's changing,
But hope is remaining.
and we can't ignore the future. It depends on you and me. One chance, all that we got. One voice, together we stand. Take care, the world where we live permite a todos vivir. Tomamos la oportunidad para importar la humanidad. And I must leave no one behind because we are
Okay, hello, welcome back. Sorry, we're having a very heated discussion here, sorry. So welcome back to our panel on building a healthy drinking culture in St. Kitts and Nevis. So the last point was a little interesting, so we might get either Dr. Pierre or Latoya to just pick up on that point and just expand on that point. So we vote for Dr. Pierre to touch on that.
One. But I mean, no problem at all. I mean, the thing is, so I think one of the things that we were discussing is really speaking to some of the harmful effects of water while promoting it. And I think, to Latoya's point, maybe we sort of reserve that or shelve that for another show, so that we don't sort of giving people reasons and say, well, listen to this water, because we haven't said how much of that is toxic, right? I think, to be fair, water toxicity is a concern. I have never seen one in my 20 plus years of practice. Whereas alcoholics, I'm confronting them every single day. So I think as a medical doctor, I'd be a lot more concerned about individuals, for example, patients who have renal disease and heart failure. And for those individuals, there may be some water intake restriction. Purely because of the underlying health condition brought about by the alcohol, by the way, and the sugary beverages. But insofar as water toxicity, which you see a lot in the college dorms and so on for water hazing and stuff like that happens, I like to think of things in context in terms of what are we really struggling with right now. Mr. Natal brought up the Prime Minister, how we say, one of the things is, there's one thing that the Prime Minister is known for is that he does not drink alcohol. And I think that has to be one of the things that I think that has his profile, apart from the public persona and so on, has to be used as well, because he does not consume any alcohol as far as I'm aware. I don't know if things have changed. We did say stress is linked to alcohol intake, and I imagine that's a very stressful job. But I think the other things I wanted to also say as well, in terms of we spoke of some of the initiatives we could have. One of the things I'm challenged with is just how much celebration there is packed into 1 month of the year when people have access to the largest sums of money. So December, for me, is a month, and St. Kitts is unique in having Christmas and Carnival together, but then you throw sugar mass on top of this. And I always say that, one of the things I've always said is that, why don't we say sugar mass and say the mass is sweet enough? Because, as a way to say, well, you don't have to consume, the mass alone, the music enough, the festivities sweet enough, and so on. I think we have to sometimes do that sort of parallel advertising to make sure that we're not saying don't do this, don't do that, but we're saying here's how we can do this safely. I just think that we need some redundancy in our messaging. This is if bars are popping up left, right, and center, they're popping up in our neighborhoods. There's no self-zoning plan. You don't be surprised if right next door to you one day you wake up and there's a bar right next door. I certainly think that if we have bars are so ubiquitous, I think so too the signage that sort of promotes healthier drinking and so on has to be ubiquitous as well. And I think that's a campaign that is needed in terms of reinforcing that message. We need them on the strip. We need them in the places where there's the highest concentration of alcohol consumption, right? Because people don't go to a bar thinking of how much I'll drink. People, the thing with alcohol, the strange thing with alcohol is that when you should stop is when you actually feel like you should keep going. And that is the challenge, because you start getting nice, you're having conversation, somebody's looking at you, you see the person looking very pretty and they're very ugly. And so we have to think of things in context. To Mr. Natal's point about the water toxicity, yes, that's a valid point. But I think contextually, in the case of St. Kitts, this is a lesser concern as opposed to how much people are not drinking nearly enough water on a daily basis.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Pierre. And as we're still with you, we were talking about solutions. So I was just wondering, from your point of view, what do you think is the role of doctors and the healthcare fraternity, so doctors, nurses, mental health professionals, in terms of tackling the issues that we have around alcohol and also sugar-sweetened beverages? Is there anything else you want to add that you think is the role? Yes, you just mentioned you did. Anything else? Anything else you want to add, or you're?
I think somebody said it earlier. We can ill afford to have the diseases that we're actually tackling right now in our country. We don't have the resources to do so. So prevention. I think doctors need to go out in the community. I think we need to actually be out there. We need to prevent either the disease or its complications. I think we cannot be waiting for people to get sick to come to us. I think we have to promote healthier lifestyles, and we have to say to people, go to the doctor before you get sick, not when you're sick and the doctor can't do anything for you. We don't have nearly enough resources. We don't have enough cardiologists. We don't have enough nephrologists. We just simply cannot afford to take care of our sick people. So I certainly think that those of us who still have some degree of health, I certainly think that we should look to preserve it and we should promote it as much as possible.
Wonderful. So time is a bit against us. So for this little segment, we just have 2 minutes left. So I'm just going to throw out the question to anybody that just wants to pick it up. So what do you really think are the biggest barriers that we're facing? Because I think the issue is that we all know what the problem is. I think we all feel like we know what the solution is. So there seems to be a bit of a disconnect. So what really is the barrier for us in terms of addressing some of these issues? So does anybody want to?
Well, for me, even though the Ministry of Health remains committed to reducing the consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages as well as alcohol, however, approaches to these initiatives have to be multifaceted. And I think in St. Kitts and Nevis and even in other Caribbean countries, like I said earlier, majority of the fight is left up to the ministries. So, we need to encourage other NGOs and other community groups, etc., to join in the fight, to help all of us with these battles. So I think those are one of the challenges. Too many times persons leave it up to the ministries in order to fight these health issues.
So really IT approach where everybody gets involved. So we now are going to go to another break. And then when we come back, we're going to just wrap up with some concluding statements from each of the panelists.
It's okay to party. It's okay to drink. But it's never okay to drive after drinking at a party. Make it a night to remember, not a night to forget. Stay alive. Don't drink and drive. Make the right choice. St. Kitts and Nevis.
Healthwise on ZIZ TV, Mondays at 8:30 p.m. Hosted by Dr. Monique Lescott, Dr. Jolette Woodley, and Dr. Patrice Lawrence.
Welcome back, everyone, to our panel discussion. So we are literally, time is against us. So we're literally at the end of our panel discussion on building a healthy drinking culture in St. Kitts and Nevis. So we're just going to wrap up with a few closing points. I'm going to hand over to Dr. Pierre, who's going to who raised a good point during the break around the fact that a lot of these issues are due to addiction. So I don't know, Dr. Pierre, if you'd just like to make a closing point around that. And then Michelle, if you want to make a closing point. Latoya, if you want to add anything else, I know you wrapped up just now, and then Mr. Natal will wrap up, and then I will do a final wrap up.
10 seconds. I think it's really just that for us to really tackle this in a way that makes sense, yes, all of society, but we have to be cognizant of what exactly we're tackling, and I think it's an addiction, right? The sugar is addictive. There are lots of research that shows how addictive is sugar, even more than cocaine, in some studies. So I think there's that, and there's the alcohol addiction. Unless we use the same measures that we would to tackle drugs or any other type of addiction, I think we won't make as much a dent. There's also the fact that a lot of it is not politically expedient because of just how widespread the problem and the consumption is. So how do we tackle something that seems to be taking away the drug from people that they have? So I think those are some of the things that we have to look at, and I think it requires everyone, the Chamber of Commerce, the political directorate, and everyone to really look at this and see what are some of the measures we can take. We won't get there overnight, but we can actually begin to make some inroads.
Wonderful. Michelle, any closing points?
Sure. So I will piggyback off of what Dr. Pierre just said in terms of it being an addiction. It brings me to the point of policy, because I am a certified health education specialist. Of course, I see the value in health education, but as he said, it is often an addiction, and many people, even health professionals themselves that have a high degree of knowledge, still find themselves drawn to sugar-sweetened beverages, alcohol, and different different foods and drinks that are not best for our health. And so I think that is bringing about the importance of policy as well, in terms of trying to make sure that the default choice, the convenient choice, is also a healthy choice. Because as long as sugar-sweetened beverages and alcohol are easily accessible, as long as they're easily accessible in terms of not only location but price, we will have a hard time fighting this. So of course we need sugar-sweetened beverage taxes, alcohol taxes, front of package warning labels, and school nutrition policies.
Wonderful, thank you. So time is against us. So Mrs. Duncan, do you want to add anything?
Yes, I'm just going to
Okay.
that Michelle says. Basically, success depends on strong policies, effective enforcement, public awareness and education, as well as the availability of healthier alternatives.
Wonderful, thank you. Mr. Natal?
We have a sort of antagonistic environment because we have a social ill. The government is generating revenue on one end from the consumption of sweet drinks and alcohol. And we have to have that political will too. It must be in unison with the social will, because we are experiencing the social ill and we cannot go it alone. Government would have to give it support. Anyhow, I have always likened life to the playing of an orchestra, where the bicycle tuning up comes first, followed by the sweetly blended harmonious music. I only wish that we could go from strength to strength in looking after these ills that are confronting our societal.
Thank you so much. So time is against us, so even though we've had such a wonderful and interesting discussion, we're going to have to wrap up. So I really just would like to just say thank you to everyone who participated in this panel discussion. I just want to sum up though by just saying that I think it's clear that if we're to build a healthy drinking culture, that it needs to be a collective effort. So I think we've ended well in saying that not only do we need this collective effort, but we need the public as well to try and make informed decisions. We need the awareness and education. We need the policy. We need strong leadership from our government. Our government's going to have to make some difficult decisions. We would encourage the government to do so. And of course, civil society like ourselves also need to get involved to advocate for policies, to advocate for behavior change as well. So I'd just like to thank Dr. Pierre for being on this panel and providing the medical expertise. I'd like to thank Michelle as well for providing her expertise as well. Mrs. Duncan for providing her expertise and sharing the Ministry of Health's initiatives in terms of tackling the issues. Mr. Natal from the Drug Prevention Officer at the St. Kitts Nevis National Council on Drug Abuse. We'd like to thank you for your time and for really taking us through all the issues around alcohol. Obviously, I'd like to thank the Ministry of Health, because this is a part of the St. Kitts and Nevis Moves 7-week campaign, which is ongoing. I'd like to thank the St. Kitts and Nevis Moves Committee for their leadership in organizing this event. And of course, we'd like to thank ZIZ, our hosts, for hosting us tonight. So thank you so much. And thank you to the listening audience for sticking with us. And hopefully you found this conversation interesting and informative. And I wish everyone a wonderful evening. Good night.